Revealed. The sinister, spine-chilling rules of my haunted night shift at a radio station. Rebecca glanced at the flickering lights of the old radio station, nestled in the heart of the small Midwestern town. Night had fallen, and she could almost feel the darkness breathing around her. As she walked in, the creaking door seemed to echo her trepidation. She was alone again, with nothing but the hum of ancient machinery and the soothing crackle of static to keep her company. Her heartbeat quickened. The night shift couldn't be just another paycheck. It was her lifeline, her only hope against the eviction notice that loomed like a specter. But tonight was different. The atmosphere outside, thick and suffocating, pressed against the glass like an ominous warning. As she prepared her notes, she caught glimpses of her neighbors slipping into the shadows. Their faces, once friendly and familiar, contorted into sinister masks under the stark glow of the streetlights. A chill crawled up her spine. Something was wrong. And then, just as the clock struck 12, a sudden burst of static blasted through the studio speakers, snapping her from her uneasy reverie. Shadows danced across the control panel, creeping like unseen fingers. She instinctively glanced around, the air charged with something dark. And that S when she heard them, whispers, indecipherable yet haunting, filtering through the radio waves as if they were meant only for her. Help. Hidden. Darkness, each word laced with dread. Her heart raced. How could the static echo her own fears? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A flicker caught her eye. Papers strewn about the floor, hastily scrawled notes that sent her stomach lurching. They watch from the shadows. The townsfolk are not what they seem. She felt like a marionette tangled in its strings, each note tightening the grip of paranoia around her chest. Her instincts screamed at her to call home. Her son was alone, helpless, while she was trapped in this echoing tomb. The air grew colder, a malevolent presence brushing against her skin. Just then, a brash local journalist sauntered in, a leech looking for a story. Did you hear about the asylum? He whispered, eyes gleaming with dread. It's all connected. This place, it's haunted by its past. Her breath hitched. The asylum? The very heartbeat of those forgotten horrors tied around the station like chains. Then her phone rang. Her son's terrified voice crackled through the receiver. Mom, come home, please. Panic shot through her. The comforting hum of her studio turned to a deafening roar. Shadows elongated outside, stretching towards her. The familiar faces of her neighbors morphing into grotesque parodies of kindness. They were not the people she thought they were. The doubt filled her, racing alongside her desperate heartbeat. She bolted outside, her heart pounding in her ears. The street was too quiet. Where were the usual sounds of life? Where was the safety she once felt? The shadows twisted and churned, and she could have sworn she saw a figure lurking in the dim light, a shape she thought she could trust. Was this another trick? In that moment of realization, she knew this night would unearth secrets buried deep, and she was about to confront a horror she never saw coming. Who could she truly rely on in a town where every comforting smile hid something sinister? The air felt thicker than before, pressing in on Rebecca like a weight she couldn't shake off. Each step carried her further into the unknown, and the shadows slithered closer, reaching out as if they had a mind of their own. Panic clawed at her throat. What did the journalist mean by haunted by its past? As she turned the corner, the streetlights flickered again, plunging her into darkness for a chilling moment. Heart racing, she felt the world around her tilt. The echoes of her son's voice still rang painfully in her ears. Please. She couldn't let him down. But what awaited her in the depths of the night? Then she saw them. A group of figures stepped from the shadows, faces partially obscured but eyes glinting with something dangerously predatory. The way they moved had a serpentine grace, every step calculated. Her stomach nodded. They were gathered around a radio antenna, heads bowed, whispering in unison. The words seemed to vibrate in resonance with the very fabric of the air. The whispers picked up again, seeped into her mind like oil, slick and vile. Join us, embrace the darkness, be one of us. They turned as one, their collective gaze locking on her. A coldness crept through Rebecca, washing over her like ice water. Stay back, she shouted, forcing her voice to break through the tension. But it only spurred them, their smiles widening, revealing teeth too sharp and eyes too vacant. They stepped toward her, almost gliding, like shadows of the night come alive. Rebecca spun on her heel and ran, adrenaline propelling her forward. Every instinct screamed at her to flee. She dashed down the street, heart hammering, but the whispers of the townsfolk trailed close behind, wrapping around her like a suffocating cloak. The night air sliced against her skin as she turned sharply towards the alley behind the station. Maybe if she could circle back, get to her car and drive, the thought propelled her as she stumbled into darkness. The alley was cluttered with debris, old crates, and forgotten memories. She could barely see. Suddenly, a cold hand grasped her arm. A jolt of terror shot through her. "Where are you going, Rebecca?" It was the journalist, his face now twisted into a mask of fervor. "You don't want to abandon us. You belong with them now." He pulled her closer. She could feel the bitterness of his breath against her cheek. With a surge of instinct, she wrenched herself free, heart pounding from both fear and exertion. Around her, shadows began to twitch and coalesce, the memories of those lost souls merging with the air itself, beckoning her to join their ranks. "No!" she screamed, tearing through the other end of the alley and into the street that led back to the station. Her sanctuary now seemed tainted with corruption. But there, illuminated in a beam of light, stood her son at the entrance of the station, wide-eyed and trembling. "Mom! Help!" She focused on his panicked face, pushing away everything else, bolting towards him. Darkness chased her, remnants of the townspeople intertwining among the shadows. She could hear the whispers grow louder, more intense, pounding against her skull. "Join us," it echoed, a chilling embrace pulling her closer to the void of despair. The pain of regret clawed at her innermost being. "I'll protect him. I'll protect my child," she vowed silently. As she reached him, the air crackled, heavy with something unspeakable. With one final breath, she pulled her son into her arms, but were they already too late to escape? Behind her, shadows swirled in anticipation, pulse quickening, eyes glimmering with hunger. What had she summoned in this night of nightmares? The haunted truth awaited them like a predator in the dark. The moment Rebecca wrapped her arms around her son, the whispers intensified like a swarm of angry bees, their buzzing filling every crevice of her mind. She felt a wave of icy breath wash over her, like the night itself had come alive with a malice all its own. The radio station flickered under the pressure, lights dimming as if even the structure itself was afraid. "Mom," her son whimpered, looking at her with wide, terrified eyes. "They're coming for us." Rebecca couldn't look away from the boy. His innocence struck a painful chord within her. She glanced back toward the shadows. The figures had drawn closer, the coil of their bodies undulating like smoke. It no longer felt like a choice. They were no longer individuals. They were an entity, an ominous collection of desires and secrets buried deep. "Stay close to me, Alex," she whispered, trying to sound brave, though her voice trembled like a leaf caught in a windstorm. They were trapped. The alley, a sinister prism of decay and despair, had become a funnel. Then the whispers morphed again, turning sweet, almost seductive. "You can't run from what you are. You belong to us now." The seductive tone clawed at the edges of her sanity, pulling her deeper into their dark allure. She tightened her grip on Alex. It ignited a flicker of defiance. "They don't control us," she shouted, but even she could feel her conviction wavering. "Mom!" Alex's voice cut through the noise, a plea that shattered the glassy facade of fear. The tendrils of darkness tightened, wrapping around them. As they hovered inches off the ground, Malevolent faces gazed hungrily from the recesses of the dark. "Run!" she yelled, darting away from the entrance, dragging Alex along. The station loomed behind them, its once stalwart walls now a sanctuary filled with danger. They dodged through the vacant streets, but the air was thick with dread. The shadows clung to them, reaching with winding fingers that brushed against her back. She could feel their icy breath, whispering of despair and regret, teasing of secrets untold. "Mom?" Alex's voice trembled again, dragging her focus back to him. "Where are we going? What do they want?" She glanced at her son, the light of desperation clawing through her heart. "I don't know, baby, but we're not giving in. We'll find a way out." For the first time, the fear edged on something else. Determination surged within her veins. They turned down another street, but further down, a figure emerged. It was the journalist again, his eyes reflecting the anguish of the souls from before. "You can't escape this," he hissed, a twisted smile creeping across his lips. "Do you really think you have the power to resist? You're meant for this, for us." With every step, the shadows pressed in tighter. The sound of their unified breath became palpable, no longer just whispers but a chorus of despair that filled the silence. Suddenly, Alex cried out, "Mom, look!" He pointed at a wall where the shadows danced erratically, forming fleeting images of what seemed like a portal, a way out. "Over there," Rebecca urged, heart racing, each pulse a desperate prayer as she pulled her son forward. But as they approached, the air shifted, the space closing in like a vice. The shadows lurked, taunting them, and she could feel it, the weight of countless souls trapped in an endless loop of longing. "No, we can't let them win," she shouted, desperation fueling her legs as they sprinted towards the swirling darkness. A glimmer of light beckoned in the center. A chance, but the shadows surged forward, coiling like serpents ready to strike. "Join us," they hissed again, the chilling sound causing Rebecca's breath to hitch in her throat. As they reached the edge, the reality of their fate loomed near. Would they be swallowed whole by the despair that haunted this night? With a final, desperate grip, Rebecca held Alex close. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The moment was electric. The darkness seemed to pulse with anticipation, and a haunting question curled around them: would they step through into the light or succumb to the shadows? Her heart thundered this was their last chance. What would they find on the other side? A pulse of energy crackled between them as they stepped toward the swirling light, daring to embrace the unknown. But just as Rebecca thought they might escape, the portal flickered, its allure dimming like a dying star. "No, please!" Alex's voice broke through her resolve. The shadows recoiled and surged again, infuriated by their defiance. "Mom, they're not letting us go." She could feel the shadows pressing in, their whispers turning violent, pleading and threatening all at once. It was as if the darkness was alive, corded fingers gripping her mind. Panic strangled her throat, but she couldn't show fear in front of Alex. "Stay close," she hissed through teeth clenched tight. They stumbled back, their feet slapping against the ground, breath hitching in unison. The darkness pulsed with a life of its own, hungry shapes swirling around them. Faces emerged anguished, twisted, a gallery of sorrowful souls begging for release. "Mom!" Alex screamed, tightening his grip on her hand, his nails digging into her skin. "Don't let them take me." Swallowing her own terror, Rebecca turned fiercely to the portal, as if it held the promise of salvation. "We can do this," she yelled, forcing conviction into her voice. "They can't take us." The shadows hissed, a chilling chorus melding with the pounding in her ears. Each step backward felt like walking through molasses. They were being pulled, sucked into a nightmarish spiral. Those faces, full of despair, hovered in her periphery, clawing at her sanity. "You think you can escape the truth?" they cried, their voices a guttural blend of rage and plea. "You are part of us." "No," Rebecca shouted defiantly. "I'm not." In that heartbeat, she saw a flicker, a chance, a glimmer of hope unrealized. Amidst the chaos, an image of the radio station flooded her mind. The space should have felt welcoming, but it now seemed suffocating, a memory tethered to something malign. "Alex, it's the radio," she blurted, almost sensing the way out. "We have to go back. We can find a way to stop them." A flicker of recognition ignited his eyes. "The station? But what if we can't stay here?" she urged, pulling him toward the way they came, ignoring the clawing shadows that now howled with fury. Every instinct screamed for them to flee, to succumb to the darkness. But her heart was a war drum, pounding out bloody threats that shook her core. They raced through the ever-present mist, the air thick and stifling, as if the night was trying to swallow them whole. Shadows lunged, their wispy arms snatching at Alex's ankles, while Rebecca pulled him forward with every ounce of strength she could summon. Each breath was a struggle, each heartbeat like a timer counting down to their end. Another figure emerged from the shadows, an old woman with hollow eyes and a rictus grin, her laughter slicing through the cold air. "You can't escape your fate, dear," she crooned, her voice dripping with malice. Rebecca felt the world tilt. "What fate?" she shouted back, scrambling to keep Alex close. "We decide what happens next. Do you have the power to resist? They'll come for you." The shadows writhed, their collective voice hissing and mocking. Then, as if sensing their resolve to push on, they surged again, wrapping around Rebecca's legs, drawing her back into their dark embrace. An icy finger traced along her spine, and for a moment, she felt the weight of a million regrets pressing against her lungs, like stepping into ice-cold water. "No," she gasped, ripping herself from the shadow's grasp. "You don't get to decide." With renewed fierce energy, they reached the station's entrance, her hands flying to the door like a lifeline. Would it be their salvation, or the mouth of the beast? The light flickered ominously as she turned the knob. Rebecca nudged the door open, and cold gusts whipped through like fingers grasping at her heart. "Mom," Alex trembled, his voice shaking too much. "Together. Always." She looked back, the shadows looming behind them, waiting for one small slip. They stepped through the doorway, breath hitching in anticipation. But this time the whispers seemed different, their tones simmering with a twisted glee. "Welcome home," they crooned, rough gales mixing with the echo of their laughter. What awaited them inside, and what final cost would they pay to break free from the grips of the shadows? The moment they crossed the threshold, darkness swirled around them like a living thing, coiling through the air, tugging at their limbs. The radio station felt alien now, its familiar contours warped by the shadows that crawled across the walls. Static crackled in the air like malicious laughter, an unseen presence mocking them. "Mom!" Alex clutched her hand tighter, his face pale with fear. "What if we can't make them leave?" "Shoo!" Her heart raced. "We're okay. We just need to find the studio. It will be here somewhere." As they moved deeper into the station, the familiar sounds of static and muffled voices faded into distorted whispers, indistinguishable yet full of urgency. The walls, once filled with the history of late-night broadcasts, now felt like a mausoleum of lost souls echoing their unfinished stories. "Look," Alex's voice trembled, drawing her attention to a flickering light down the corridor, the faint glow casting eerie shadows that danced like lost spirits yearning for release. "Stay close," she implored, dragging him along. But with each step, the walls felt like they were closing in, the air growing thicker, more oppressive. The whispers turned chaotic, a haunting cacophony that echoed her every doubt. "You think you can banish us? You're part of us." The voices taunted, filling the dark corners with dread. "Shut up. We'll find a way," Rebecca shouted, though her voice quivered with uncertainty. She could feel her resolve slipping, gnawed at by the grasping fingers of despair. Finally, they reached the studio door. The glass was cracked, a stark reminder of something once whole now tainted. Rebecca reached for the knob, her skin crawling as she brushed it against the darkness. A chilling breeze swept through, freezing her breath. "Mom," Alex begged, a whine of desperation etched in his voice. Invoking her last reserves of courage, she opened the door. The room was engulfed in darkness, oppressive and thick. Strange symbols adorned the walls, jagged and cryptic, drawn in a viscous substance that glimmered with a sinister light. The equipment lay in disarray, the microphones, broken, their cases painted with what looked like dried blood. "What is this?" Alex whispered, peering over her shoulder, his voice barely a breath. But before Rebecca could answer, a jaw of shadows erupted from the corner of the room. It formed an apparition, a monstrous figure, stretching and twisting into a ghostly visage. Its hollow eyes locked onto her, filled with an unearthly hunger. "You're home now. We've been waiting," it rasped, its voice a blend of 100 mournful cries. Rebecca's heart plunged into her stomach. She couldn't breathe. Her instincts screamed at her to run. "No!" she shouted defiantly, stepping forward despite the fear clawing at her gut. "You don't own me." The figure recoiled, but the shadows thickened around them, a living tide. "You think you have a choice? This is your fate." Suddenly, a surge of light erupted from the equipment across the room, piercing through the shadows. The voices grew frantic, shrieking as they twisted in the light's grasp. "Stop! You cannot interrupt the cycle." "Alex, now!" Rebecca shouted, pushing her son toward the equipment as she fought against the suffocating darkness. She could feel it tugging at her, pulling her mind into its chaotic depths. They dashed to the console, fingers flying over the buttons, searching for a way to harness the light. The whispers turned into a violent storm, thrashing against their ears, slicing through their thoughts. "You will regret this. Find the frequency," Rebecca urged, desperation clawing at her throat. If the light could disrupt this nightmare, they had to seize it. As Alex hesitating over the console's array of buttons, a whisper slid into Rebecca's mind, an icy, urgent pluck of dread. "What if this is all in vain?" The whispers swelled to a deafening crescendo, drowning out the logic of reason. The room shook, shadows threatening to collapse inward as she braced for whatever horror came next. Would they be swallowed by the darkness, or would they find a flicker of salvation? And amid the chaos, one question lingered like a haunting refrain. What would be the price of their escape? The light pulsed, and as it did, the shadows shrieked in agony. The shadows writhed violently, clawing at the edges of the light like hungry beasts. Rebecca's heart pounded. Each pulse felt like a thunderclap in the suffocating silence that followed the screams. "Alex, focus!" she gasped, her voice barely making it past the weight of fear. "It's too much," he cried, eyes wide as he frantically pressed buttons. The console now a chaotic orchestra of beeping alarms and flickering lights. The cacophony seemed to attract the darkness, drawing it closer, like moths to a flame. The apparition loomed larger, contorting with rage and desperation. "Fools! You cannot escape what is meant to be. You belong to us." Rebecca gritted her teeth and forced herself to push against the rising tide of despair. "We will not be your prisoners," she declared, her doubt melting in the heat of her defiance. Suddenly, the equipment exploded with a blinding flash. She shielded her eyes, flinching from the brilliance. The room twisted, colors spiraled, and for a moment, she was weightless, floating between dimensions. Then, all at once, the room snapped back. The shadows howled, a sound so visceral it wrapped around her throat, clawing at her sanity. "You will pay," the light flickered, a pulse that felt more alive by the moment. "There, that dial," Rebecca shouted, pointing with urgency. Alex scrambled to find it, fingers shaking, terror painted across his face. Somewhere beyond the panic, a sliver of hope took shape. If they could just tune into the right frequency, perhaps they could break free from this living nightmare. But as Alex twisted the dial, a rush of wind surged through the room, the lights dimming momentarily. Please work," he cried, desperation burning in each breath. The air sizzled before them, the darkness recoiling at the intensity of the light. It glimmered against the symbols on the walls, illuminating the jagged shapes that seemed to breathe, writhe, and reconfigure as if alive with dark energy. "Stop!" the apparition screamed, the voice filled with rage. "You are meddling in things beyond your understanding." Alex locked eyes with his mother, fear mixing with determination. I can't hold it for long. It's too powerful. With every moment, the strength of the darkness surged against them, trying to drown out the flickering light like a wave slamming against a fragile boat. Rebecca felt her own energy waning, yet something primal ignited within her. This was a fight for survival, a chance to renounce the darkness that sought to consume them. Just a little longer, honey, she urged, resolve hardening her chest. We can do this. With one final twist, Alex finally found it a long silenced frequency that pulsed with a familiar warmth. The moment he pressed down, the light exploded outward, a beacon of pure resistance against the shadows swarming them. The wails erupted, sounding more animalistic, filled with anger and betrayal, as they rattled the walls. No, you can't do this. The shadows began to unravel, fraying at the edges as the light intensified. Rebecca felt a surge of power rip through her, waking something dormant inside of her, something that had been screaming to be released. Together, we have to harness it, she yelled, gripping Alex's arm tightly, forming a bond against the chaos. But as they stood united, hands gripping the console, the room trembled under the force of the light. It cast aside the darkness that had wrapped around them, revealing the room for what it truly was, a battleground. In the midst of their fight, Alex gasped. Mom, look! A chilling reflection was cast in the remaining shadows, a multitude of faces, distorted and broken, their eyes pleading in the dark. Each figure seemed familiar, connected to their lives in some implicit way. What are they? Rebecca whispered, dread crawling back into her heart. And just as the light reached its zenith, she realized a truth more terrifying than the shadows. The faces were people she'd known, people who had vanished. No, she stammered, panic racing through her. Are they trapped here? The light flickered erratically as the apparition screeched, desperate, mocking. You've seen them now. They cannot help you. Would they dare to proceed, guided by this haunting truth? Would they sacrifice everything to save those who had been lost, yet never forgotten? The room held its breath, caught between light and dark, as the silhouettes danced in the periphery of their minds, and the decision loomed like an executioner's blade. What would they have to give up to save their souls from this nightmare? The room shook like a living entity, vibrations crawling beneath Rebecca's skin. Waves of light pulsed from the console, challenging the encroaching darkness with a ferocity that made her heart race. She could see fear etched on Alex's face, the same face she had once comforted as a child. It felt like a distant memory, now lost amidst the chaos. Mom, he whispered, voice cracking, what if we can't help them? I can't think like that, Rebecca replied, determination mingling with dread. We have to try. She squeezed his hand tighter, feeling his warmth grounding her amidst the surge of dark energy. The shadows roared, a tempest of anguish and fury clawing at the edges of their sanity. Faces, ghastly silhouettes of loved ones and acquaintances continued to swirl around them, each one a reminder of a past that had clawed its way into the present. The wails became shrieks of denial. Save us. Set us free. They begged, their voices overlapping, creating a dissonant symphony of despair. Every moment we hesitate, they suffer, Rebecca shouted, desperation carving lines into her face. We have to push through this. The lights sputtered, a heartbeat in a dying body. Alex, driven by primal courage and the bond they shared, twisted the dial again. This can't be real, he cried. They're just shadows. Shadows that we care about. She countered fiercely as the words left her mouth. The lights blazed brighter, illuminating the hidden symbols on the walls with a fevered brilliance. The symbols began to shift, a language untold yet somehow known. The air vibrated with a deep hum, resonating with their determination. Maybe it's a trap, Alex reasoned, uncertainty creeping into his tone. What if we unleash something worse? A shattering crack rent the air. The apparition erupted, black smoke swirling wildly, forming terrible shapes that seemed to gloat in their indecision. You think you can save them? You think you have the right? It howled, its voice a thunderstorm of fury. Rebecca's heart sank deeper. I won't play your game. This ends now. With a surge of resolve, She directed the pulsing light against the shadows, focusing every ounce of her being. But her strength began to wane. She felt the darkness pulling at her, like familiar hands trying to embrace her. Faces flickered in the smoke, faces she couldn't bear to acknowledge. Friends lost to oblivion. The tug of memories was overpowering. "Don't give in," she gasped, paralyzed by the emotional weight. Suddenly, the light flickered. Alex noticed the shadows were less aggressive, cornered by their determination. They don't want us to touch them. They're afraid. His revelation ignited a spark of hope. "What if we show them we're not afraid?" Rebecca suggested, her voice steady now, emboldened. "What if we confront our fears, their fears?" Fueled by newfound courage, Alex nodded, gripping the dial with unwavering resolve. Together, with one last twist, they pushed the light as far as they could, bridging the gap between the living and the dead. "Whatever darkness has hold of you, it won't clutch you for long," Rebecca shouted into the tumult. For a brief moment, the shadows paused, as if reevaluating their twisted existence. Rebecca caught a glimpse into the void, eyes wide with terror but also flickering with recognition. "Mom, they're there trying to reach for us." In that instant, the air snapped like a taut wire. A ripple of white-hot energy surged forth, clashing against the shadows in a violent explosion of colors. The room pulsed, threatening to implode. Time slowed as Rebecca met the gaze of an unseen face, a friend lost, trapped between realms. She felt the ground beneath her tremble in warning, reality teetering on the edge. What if we're not strong enough? What if we— But before she could complete the thought, an ear-splitting howl erupted, a cacophony of anguish that threatened to tear them apart. The room was a maelstrom of chaotic energy, and at the center, their beacon flickered wildly, the very essence of their hope wavering. Would they hold on in the face of this darkness? Would they dare confront their own past, the shadows of guilt urging them to turn away? As the light dimmed with momentous uncertainty, silhouettes shifted closer, reaching, grasping, remembering. The question screamed in her mind. Would they become part of the shadows? Or would they break free? What price will we pay to free them? Rebecca's heart pounded as the light flickered again. The decision loomed like a knife. Could they bear the cost of rescue? The energy crackled around them, an electric tension pulling Rebecca back, as the shadows seemed ready to engulf her whole. She closed her eyes, urgent whispers of fear clawing at her consciousness. Not again. A pulse of darkness prickled against her skin. Memories surged, flickering like a broken film reel. "Mom!" Alex's voice cut through her haze, desperation etched in every word. "What if we lose them? What if we lose each other?" His grip tightened, clammy and sweat-drenched. The shadows roared louder, mocking their fear, all-consuming. Together Rebecca breathed, the word barely a whisper as she fought against the tide of despair. She couldn't let this be the end. They had to forge ahead. "Let them go!" she screamed, summoning strength she didn't know she had. Light shot from the console, vivid and blinding, illuminating the faces swirling around them, trapped in a nightmarish loop of sorrow. Disembodied voices, once tender whispers, now turned into a deafening cacophony. "You want to save them. Join us." They beckoned, the allure of familiarity both comforting and abhorrent. She thought of the sacrifices, the faces she'd rather forget, the memories they yearned to escape. They're not monsters. It was a desperate plea echoing in the depths of her struggle. They're lost. A sudden burst of shadows lunged at them, angry and relentless. The room trembled violently, threatening to swallow them whole. Alex fell to his knees, gasping as if struck by a physical blow. "Mom, it's too much. Keep holding on," she urged, the mantra of a mother fighting the abyss. Rebecca knelt beside him, anchoring their connection. "Look at me. Look at us." The light flared once more, casting a radiant glow. The shadows flinched, retreating, haunted by their determination. "It's working," Rebecca shouted, exhilaration flooding her. But beneath that joy lurked an ominous weight. What truly lay behind those formidable silhouettes? What secrets remained hidden in the darkness? Desperation clawed at her throat. We need to dig deeper, Alex. We need to find out what they're hiding. With a shaking breath, she focused the light on one shadow, the strongest of them all. It shimmered, revealing a face she hadn't seen in years. Richard, their long-lost friend. His eyes were wild, filled with anguish. "Help me," he screamed, the cry piercing the veil of darkness. A chill ran through her. "Richard! Mom!" Alex pulled her, urgency shifting into panic. "We can't," but Rebecca felt an undeniable pull. "No, we have to help him." The room quaked, the walls echoing with the tortured voices of the past. "He is not safe. He is not real." The shadows hissed, their anger palpable. Rebecca's heart raced, thrumming against her ribs. "This isn't just about us. We can save him." She reached out toward the flickering image, but something malevolent surged forward, weaving through the shadows. "Stop! You don't understand," Richard shouted, his voice barely rising above the chaos. "They'll demand a price." In that moment the realization hit her like a punch. "What price?" she called out, fear rippling through her core. She wasn't sure they could bear another sacrifice. The shadows surged forward, swirling in a tempest of fury. "What will you give to be free?" they roared, the voices melding together into one haunting echo, drowning her out. Suddenly, a tremor shook the floor beneath them, sending them both sprawling onto the cold ground. "Rebecca!" Alex's terrified gaze met hers, a flicker of realization colliding with fear. "What if that price is us?" he whispered, horror dawning. How much would she pay to save someone lost? As the shadows moved in, wrapping tightly around both of them and the flickering light began to dim, the question hung maddeningly in the air. Would they need to sacrifice their own souls to secure another life? "Mom, we have to decide now," Alex yelled, panic rising in his voice. And as darkness threatened to swallow them whole, Rebecca's heart raced with dread. What awaited them on the other side of that choice would determine their fate. She knew this was only the beginning. What awaited ahead was a chilling revelation, but would they be ready to face it? The shadows roared louder, vibrating through Rebecca's bones. Every muscle in her body tensed, ready for an onslaught. She could barely see Alex beside her, his features blurred by the creeping darkness. It felt like the walls were closing in, towering with malicious intent. "Stay close!" she shouted over the chaos, knowing every word was a lifeline amidst the chaos. The shadows twisted, circling like wolves. Rebecca could feel a weight pressing down on her chest, thick and suffocating. "We have to make a choice, Alex." Her voice shook as she struggled to stay composed. "I won't let anything take you from me. Help him help Richard what they showed us. But at what cost?" Alex's eyes were wide, flickering with fear. He was grappling with the stakes, and she could feel him slipping away. How long could they hold against this tide of terror? Without thinking, she pointed the light toward Richard's tormented face. "We can't let him suffer. We have to try." The glow illuminated part of the nightmare, but the darkness loomed, clawing at the edges of the light. "Enough!" The collective voices of the shadows thundered, their fury a wave crashing against the coastline of her sanity. "The price is yours to give. What will you pay?" Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. "My freedom? My sanity?" The words tasted bitter like ash. "We can't give them that. Can we?" As if in answer, a wave of shadows crashed forward, pulling them further into the abyss. Suddenly, they were surrounded an impenetrable wall of darkness. The light flickered weakly, begging to be saved. She felt it slip, echoing her own fading will. "Focus," she screamed, straining to rally her strength. "We are stronger than this." But as her words fell flat, the darkness seeped into her mind. Cold fingers moved through her thoughts, stirring up memories she had buried. Her past echoed through the walls. Laughter shared, secrets confided, and memories broken by loss. Those lost moments emerged, twisted and grotesque, as if mocking her desperation. "No, I won't let you take me." But the shadows pressed on, whispering the sorrowful tales of those who had come before her. She could feel their pain, their anguish radiating through the air, and it almost made her succumb. Just when she thought all hope had been snuffed out, a flicker of light surged within her, fueled by the love for her son. "I will pay whatever it takes to save you, Alex," she shouted, her voice fortified by the determination flooding her heart. "We will break free together." But the shadows recoiled, their desperate cries turning to laughter. "What will you sacrifice? Your memories? Your very soul?" They slithered closer, taunting her with the price hanging heavy. "Anything," Alex shouted, eyes blazing with defiance. "You're worth more than any past." He squeezed her hand, the warmth weaving through her resolve. The darkness ceased its advance for a breath, a moment stretched thin and delicate. Then, "You must choose," a hissing voice echoed, dripping with malice. "Save the one you love or save yourselves." The clock ticks. The walls of the room began to close in tighter, shadows snarling, their hunger palpable. Rebecca felt the world tipping, the urge to give in rattling her resolve. But what if they could do both? Was there another way? As the shadows gathered once more, the reality of their choice loomed over her like a guillotine, poised to drop. Would they risk everything for one lost soul, or would they fight to preserve what remained of their own? The room shook again, causing the light to waver unpredictably. Was it the moment of truth, or just another trap of the shadows? The uncertainty gnawed at them as both the light and the darkness struggled for dominance. In that instant, Rebecca sensed the unspeakable, something darker than the shadows, an unseen presence looming just behind, ready to pounce. And the question hung in the air like thick fog, which sacrifice would prove to be their greatest mistake. She could feel the world around her teetering on the brink, the chilling threat of unknown horrors clawing. From beyond, was the darkest choice yet to come? Or was it already unfolding before their eyes? The shadows twisted and churned, their angry whispers rising like a tempest, feeding off the confusion that clouded Rebecca's mind. "What will you choose?" they snarled, their voices a cacophony of sorrow and rage, each syllable loaded with malice that choked the air. "Mom!" Alex's voice broke through the chaos, filled with desperation and resolve. "We can't let them win. We have to break this cycle." His eyes sparkled with determination, but uncertainty danced behind them, a flicker of fear that echoed the turmoil inside her heart. Rebecca's mind raced. The choice they faced was unbearably heavy: save Richard and risk losing their own souls, or preserve their freedom and leave him to the relentless shadows forever. The weight of every harrowing memory they pushed aside flooded her. Faces lost, promises broken. Could they sacrifice their future for someone trapped in the past? A low, rumbling laughter rippled through the darkness, vibrating in her bones. "Time is running out. The decision is yours: save the one who is already lost, or save yourselves." The shadows grew thicker, and Alex gasped, "They're tightening the grip. We have to decide now." "No!" she screamed, as an icy tendril brushed against her skin, pulling her back toward the void. "Not yet. There had to be another way. They just had to dig deeper." "Think, Rebecca," she pressed herself. "What if we can save him and ourselves? What if we can break the chains binding him, collective sorrow through love?" The whispers quieted momentarily, as if contemplating the audacity of such a thought. But then, a stronger wave of shadows surged forth, snapping like angry vipers. "You fool! You think love can free him? It may cost you everything." "Maybe so," she shouted defiantly, "but love is stronger than fear, and we won't let you win." Together, they gripped the console tighter, aligning their energy toward the pulsing light. Rebecca felt a flicker of warmth emerge between her and Alex, a raw power born from their bond. "Let us channel this," Alex urged, his voice filled with urgency, their hands firm on the controls. Rebecca took a deep breath, willing to plunge into the unknown. "If we can focus on Richard and tell him we're here, maybe it will create a ripple in the shadows." With newfound vigor, they concentrated their thoughts, envisioning their friend, his laughter, shared adventures, and the bonds that once tied them together. "Richard, we're here for you," they shouted together, their words echoing through the spiraling darkness. "We will not abandon you." The light emanating from the console brightened, illuminating the walls and casting the shadows into retreat. The room trembled with energy as a figure materialized from the darkness, its features defined, revealing Richard, who looked both lost and hopeful. You found me?" he murmured, eyes wide with disbelief, caught between elation and fear. "Yes," Rebecca cried, fighting against the thick shadows that still clung to him like chains. "We're not letting you go back into that darkness. Fight with us." Richard's face reflected a semblance of clarity, but the shadows snarled, their furious whispers boiling over again. "You're making a mistake. This can only end in agony." Memories flooded Rebecca's heart, ones full of joy and laughter, but also the devastating pain of loss. "We won't let fear dictate our future," she shouted back, tightening her grip on Alex's hand, each heartbeat reverberating with the collective intent. "Let go of the lost. This ends tonight." The connection between them pulsed like a heartbeat. Love, in all its forms, channeled through them. The light erupted into a radiant explosion, illuminating the room and wrapping around Richard like a protective cocoon. Suddenly, the shadows turned chaotic, shrieking and writhing as the light exposed their twisted forms. "No, you cannot break us," they shrieked, but their voices grew faint as the purity of their love and yearning surged against the tide. "Rise, Richard," Rebecca urged, her voice soaring above the cacophony, heart racing with hope. "Break free from the darkness." With a gasp, Richard stepped forward, and for the first time, the look on his face shifted from anguish to determination. The shadows recoiled as he reached out toward the flickering light, merging with it. I'm free," he shouted, and a warm glow radiated from him, cleansing the darkness. "Together," Alex cried, pulling Rebecca close to him, their united strength crescendoing to a blinding force as they held their ground against the shadowy tide that threatened to swallow them whole. The shadows shrieked, twisted, and shrank back, the once tight grip fragmenting under the light of hope. "You think you can escape?" they howled, but as the light surged further, they began to bend and shatter, revealing the faces of all who had been lost, resonating with gratitude. "Mom, look!" Alex shouted, pointing as the shadows around them lifted, transforming into ethereal figures of those once trapped. They smiled, their voices carrying the weight of unspoken pain. "You have set us free." As the overwhelming warmth surrounded them, a wave of relief washed over Rebecca. They had done it. The cocoon of light enveloped them and Richard, pulling back the veil of shadows and fear, transforming turmoil into tranquility. "We are together now," Richard shouted, his face aglow. And just like that, the darkness that had threatened to consume them receded, leaving only a doorway behind a portal to a new beginning. The apparition's shrieks faded into silence as dawn broke. Rebecca and Alex held hands tightly, stepping through the light as the sun rose above the horizon. Together, they embraced the warmth of a new day, knowing they could face whatever came next with the strength of love unbroken. As they emerged, a soft breeze caressed their faces, bringing with it the promise of hope and new beginnings. The darkness was behind them now, and the world ahead shimmered with infinite possibility and the knowledge that love indeed conquers shadows, binding them forever. Remember to continue supporting the channel. This is the moment to show your love. Subscribe immediately so you don't miss exclusive stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to help feed the algorithm and boost our reach. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. Your thoughts matter. And wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. True fans know the importance of supporting the community.